thank you so much for having me this evening. We are going to go on a journey. This is a journey, and we're going to start pretty much at the beginning. 1970, Earth Day. I had no idea how prescient this particular image was going to be. This is me, on the right, right there, Reading, Pennsylvania, celebrating Earth Day by planting a tree. And this is the earliest memory I could find of me in a garden, and so I wanted to share it with you, not the least of which, because I love the dress. I want that dress. Okay, so I took a detour onto Wall Street. I was on Wall Street for a couple of decades, and clicking, but there you go. So the question really is, how did the person on the left from 1985 turn out to be that person on the right in 2025? And this is the journey that I'm going to share with you this evening. So, of course, it started with a big old leap across the country, skipping everything in between. Don't worry, I'm going to spend the next couple decades finding all that stuff. But I jumped from New York City to Los Angeles to go to graduate school. I got my MBA, and I went to film and television school. And I thought I was essentially going to have a career in film and television, or doing something like being an agent, or something that, you know, mixed business and Hollywood. Well, a few years after grad school, I ended up settling down with a man, and he was an artist, an animation artist. And we ended up building a house together. And then we ended up building a garden together. And this was the first time in 25 years that I had had my, well, maybe not 25, but 20 at least, years that I had had my hands in the soil. And it kind of woke something up in me. Also, this animation guy turned me on to an animated movie that I'm going to turn all of you on to now, if you haven't seen it already, called Noshka. It is possibly one of the greatest animated features of all time, and it is a story of a teenage princess who goes against her entire clan. It basically goes against everybody on the planet, because they are all trying to eliminate the insects and the microbes and the fungus that is growing over the planet after an apocalyptic nuclear event. But Noshka realizes that this poisonous microbe and insect stuff is actually cleaning the planet. It's actually healing the planet. It's converting undrinkable water into drinking water and unplantable soil into healthy soil. And so she is the one who, in the end of it, I won't give it away, but she basically brings this to everyone and shows them that she can cultivate these things, and they are actually good guys, not bad guys. My dream corporate job fell apart a few years after we built our house, you know, a few years into the mortgage. And I decided, hey, you know what? I just built a house, I just built a garden. I'm going to become a contractor. I mean, how hard can it be? And it turns out in California, the best license to have for construction is a landscape license. You can build almost anything. I call this midlife crisis number 1. There are going to be several. I'm going to the early midlife crisis. There are going to be several of them throughout the coming slides. So keep your eyes open, see if you can figure out which ones they are. All right. So as a contractor, I got really into hardscape. What landscape contractor doesn't? Loved that stuff. Didn't like plants so much, but decided, okay, I'm going to learn about plants. So I learned a little bit about plants. And you know, I got to be pretty proficient I joined APLD, I joined CLCA. You know, I was an active member of the landscape contractor community. I actually ended up going back to television to host a TV show for Discovery Channel, 52 episodes in 36 weeks, 52 hours of television in 36 weeks, building gardens and all of them. Yeah, okay, so there was that, and then fate interceded. Fate in the form of Marilyn Coleman. So we're in 2004 now. We're in 2004 now. My house and garden were on the Garden Conservancy tour. I mean, what good landscape contractor doesn't want their garden on the Conservancy tour? And so, you know, that was fine. And then after the tour, we invited everybody who had come to the house to come back for a barbecue. And this lady showed up. And we started talking, and one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, she's talking to me about putting on some charity benefiting garden tour thing to raise money for the Virginia Avenue project in Santa Monica. Would I be interested in helping with the garden tour? And you know, being a sucker, I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. It worked, by the way. We did it for 3 years. 4 years. We did it for 4 years, but one of them apparently isn't blank. And as a result of that experience and working with those people that we did the garden tour with, we ended up forming a company called G3, Green Gardens Group. And it was formed by 7 founding mothers. Marilee and I are 2 of them, and these are the other 5. They were the people who essentially put on the garden tour. Now, you're thinking, I'm not here for this lady's life story. What the heck is this about? But now we are turning specifically to soil. Because the lady on the right, who many of you probably know, Suzanne Jett, she was one of the founding mothers. And she said to us very early on, Marilee and I, you know, if you really want to get into native plant landscaping, you should take a class with Elaine Ingham, Dr. Elaine Ingham. She is the creator of something called the Soil Food Web. And we said, that sounds interesting. And the next thing you know, we're going to the Soil Food Web class, and our minds are officially blown. We go to take a class with Dr. Ingham. Dr. Ingham, by the way, turns out to be kind of a guru to us. She ends up being essentially an advisor on various projects for us. We work, you know, very nicely with her over the next several years. But what's interesting is this was a class in which suddenly we understood that soil was not the thing that you put a plant into in order to feed a plant. We realized that, in fact, the soil was alive. There were billions of creatures that were in the soil, and they weren't just there for the fun of it. They were there to work with the plant in order to create nutrient, essentially, for the plant. When the plant wanted it, we suddenly realized, wow, wait a second, plants, you know, they've got interesting stuff above ground, like photosynthesis and reproduction. That's cool. But actually, most of what's going on is going on where you can't see it, underground. And this became an absolutely fascinating concept for us. Now, Dr. Ingham is known, at the time anyway, she's evolved, which is cool. But at the time, she was known as being the compost and compost tea guru. So this was really her thing. She did a lot of teaching about what we are now going to call the decomposition pathway. So this is the decomposition pathway to soil health. In other words, organic matter added into soil will be decomposed by microbes in order to fertility of the soil, in order to change the way the plant is able to communicate with that soil. And it's really kind of all about organic matter and all about boosting the diversity of the characters who are in the soil. And this is, in 2004, this is a, if I had this talk with you in 2004, you would call me crazy. Right? This was not known, generally, especially by plant people. Kind of thought plants were independent operators. So, let me see. Yeah. And meanwhile, you're reading, so. Okay, decomposition tactic. We realize that this is a differentiating factor. If we're going to build a company, we need to build it around this concept. Soil needs to become the most important thing that we talk about at G3. And so we created a concept called OWL, oxygen, water, and life, the three components of healthy living soil. We loved it so much that our emails, and to this day, my email is G3OWL 123456789 at Gmail. Okay? We made it absolutely the center of everything, and over the ensuing 20 years, every single thing that we do in any of the organizations that I'm involved with has come back to this concept. We need to create oxygen, water, and life in order to have healthy plants, healthy world, everything. And it's just gotten better from this point. We call it the soil party also. I don't have a picture of that, but that's what we call what's going on in the soil. Okay, so I took the information that I learned at Elaine Ingham's classes and applied it in my own landscape. I had a new house by then, and I decided, okay, I'm going to do this decomposition thing in the form of sheet mulching. And so we really, at G3 and also I myself, kind of became a sheet mulching expert. And does everyone know what sheet mulching is? It's the layering of paper, some compost, mulch, lots of water. It's essentially creating a lasagna of organic matter that will decompose over time in order to change the tilth of the soil, which is the structure of the soil, and also the fertility of the soil. It's standard fare now for landscape transformation to talk about sheet composting, I call it, or sheet mulching, which is this process. So yeah, you can see I have my work cut out for me. Around the same time, G3 ended up partnering with an organization called Surfrider Foundation. Surfrider Foundation was all about finding ways to have clean water so that people could go into it at the beach. So almost their entire operation, and it's an international operation, was focused on things that you do at the beach to keep the water clean. Beach cleanups and planting grasses at the beach and so forth. But we worked with them to create something called ocean-friendly gardens, which was a concept that allowed us to take the idea of creating a garden that would actually keep the beaches clean and go up the watershed with the message, so that Surfrider could actually engage people that were pretty far away from the beach and still have a message to talk to them about. And so we created this thing called Ocean-Friendly Gardens, along with this guy, Paul Herzog. And Paul also became an absolute soil guru. He brewed compost tea, he was into compost, everything you can possibly imagine. And in the development of the principles of ocean-friendly gardening, soil health became a tent-pole concept. It was really the center of what they were talking about. Now, one of the things that was happening here was we were beginning to see soil health as being the key to a lot of other environmental solutions. So soil health, of course, we knew that was going to be plant health, but we also began to learn about the fact that soil health created better water quality. It allowed for better water conservation, better water holding capacity, right? When you had healthy soil, you didn't have to apply as much irrigation. So the soil health thing really kind of started to gel as something that was a message that we could use for any landscaping, pretty much anywhere. And we developed the sign, we developed the concepts, and we started building a lot of soil-centric gardens. And then G3 decided that we should be in the teaching business. And so we began to develop classes and workshops for the general public and for professionals to begin to spread this message of soil-centric gardening, essentially. Ocean-friendly gardening, soil-centric gardening. And so we began to teach people about, about soil. They're doing their thing there. Can't read the board down here, but it says something about fungi. Hey, what does it say? It says something like fungi creates opportunities or something. I think that's funny. Okay, anyway. As we began to develop this soil-centric concept, we realized, soil-centric, that isn't really very hip, and it doesn't really fit. Like, water conservation people don't get it. Water quality people don't get it. People who are concerned about air quality don't get it. And believe me, the horticultural people don't get it. So, what are we going to do that people could actually get? So we began to think about, well, maybe there's a concept that encompasses all of this. What if we began to look at systems that work out in the world, like watersheds, healthy, balanced watersheds? And what if we started thinking about every single property as though it were a mini watershed, so that we could actually begin to mimic the things that work in nature in our own landscapes? And what are the things that work in nature? Well, they are things like capturing rainwater and using it as a resource, selecting local climate-appropriate plants. If you have irrigation, making sure it's super efficient irrigation. And then, of course, at the center of it all is healthy living soil that acts like a sponge. And so we began to really explore this understanding of what we call soil structure, which is the behavior of soil that goes beyond its texture. Texture is sand, silt, or clay. You cannot change whether you have one or a mix of those things. You can't change that. But you absolutely, every single person can change the structure of their soil. Your soil can either be a brick or it can be a sponge. A sponge holds onto water in dry times and releases it slowly in wet times. Every single landscape, regardless of the type of soil that you have, could be a sponge. And the way that it becomes a sponge is by building that soil into healthy living soil, tending to the microbial community, and as far as we know at this point, it's all about decomposition, making sure you have compost, making sure you have mulch going on, and making sure that you have plants to be able to manage microbes. But we're still decomposition people at this stage. We also developed a professional training, a certification training, and we took it to the EPA. And we actually got approval from EPA for their WaterSense program, which is a water conservation program, to do this professional training. A soil-centric EPA WaterSense professional training that you can take anywhere in the country. And the thing that began to happen with this is we realized, most of what's going on in the landscape industry when we talk about water conservation is saying, landscapes boil down to the type of plant you use and the type of irrigation you use, and that's really all that matters. And we realized, wait a second, that's not what matters. What matters is the kind of soil. Do you have a sponge or do you have a brick? And then we can talk about the types of plants and the type of irrigation and all that. So this particular professional training was and remains a super controversial, really like cutting edge, totally defiant of pretty much what everybody else in landscaping talks about at the professional level. But we were still concerned because, you know, we're hitting those people who are in water conservation, but we're not really getting out to like 40 people. We're not getting out to people who are changing landscapes from grass to some other, plant material. How do we do so? Well, we got in the business of writing guidebooks. Thanks to Stephanie Bartron, who's here today. We got into the business of actually taking all this knowledge that we had and putting it in, and every single one of the guidebooks that we started writing for agencies and cities and states was about soil. And we started doing hands-on workshops of brewing and delivering compost tea, and also a lot more sheet mulching. So if you were going to remove your grass and replace it with garden, we wanted to make sure that everybody did sheet mulching in order to build their soil in order to ensure a more healthy outcome when they planted. In 2015, we convened the first one, Soil Summit at the Natural History Museum. And we invited scientists from all over the world to come and talk to us about soil to help us to understand, more things. And our minds were blown by this lady. This is Dr. Suzanne Simard. She came to us and explained to us about the mother tree. The mother tree connects into a fungal network and communicates directly with the rest of the forest. It can recognize a mother tree can recognize its own children. It can selectively send nutrients and especially carbon packets, which is really, by the way, carbon is the money of the microbial community. So, everything is run by carbon. Mother trees could exchange carbon with their children. If their children were really far away, they could actually kill off young children that were closer if there was a disease or if they themselves were under threat, and send resources to children further away to try to ensure that progeny lived. Suzanne Simard showed us that in a forest where you had deciduous trees and evergreen trees, in the wintertime, when the deciduous trees had lost their leaves, the evergreens were photosynthesizing and sending carbon to the deciduous trees to keep them alive. And in the spring, when the deciduous trees put their leaves back on, they returned to favor to the evergreens. So this is really something that, not only blew our minds, but it opened up a whole new world. Like, oh, wait a second, soil isn't just all about decomposition, it's actually a communication network. There's something really sentient going on here in the soil. In fact, there are studies that show that there's ocean DNA in forests thousands and thousands of miles away. How does that happen? It happens because when fish come up the rivers and spawn up in the rivers, bears eat the fish and drag their carcasses into the forest, and that DNA then is spread out by the fungal network, spread out through the entire forest. One of the things that is affecting boreal forests and these climax forests that is negatively affecting them is the fact that fish are not able to come back upstream in order to spawn. And so this DNA, these nutrients, these essential nutrients that come from the ocean are not making it back to forests. And as a result, the forests suffer. Okay, this is heavy stuff. So trees are supporting other species through their network. And even when a tree dies, it is taking all of its carbon, all of its life force, and sending it out and sharing it. And all I could think of at the time was, oh my gosh, Avatar is real. The awa, the tree, is actually, it's the way it works. I gotta pick it up. So, based on a lot of what Suzanne Simard was talking about, we realized that plants and soil are in a dialogue, and that plants are actually using their power of photosynthesis, of taking carbon out of the atmosphere and converting it into sugary substances mostly, but other things as well, and feeding it to a microbial community so that the microbes can do various jobs like mine nutrient or bring water or share enzymes. And that this exchange is really, as I say, a sentient thing, that the plants are in control of their environment. They are re-engineering soil. They are determining who is there in their own soil party. They're determining whether they have a brick or a sponge, and they all prefer sponge. And this is ongoing, and this is how nature works. We also met this guy, Alan Savory. Alan Savory explained to us that animals and land are absolutely intertwined, that the land craves an animal. Land that does not have animals on it is degraded. And he showed us through his research that was happening at the time in Zimbabwe that animal impact in the form of herbivores in particular, because they have a rumen, and using herbivores on the land actually improved the quality of the land. This was highly controversial at the time because no one could wrap their head around it. We were all used to overgrazing or undergrazing. We didn't have a handle on, no, this is called adaptive grazing. This is essentially putting animals on the land to behave the way they would in a much more natural setting if there weren't humans there. And so moving them around and so forth. Turns out, all that stuff that's in their rumen is actually the same microbes that are in the soil. When an animal bites a blade of grass, it stimulates the plant to put down stronger roots, to actually cultivate a stronger microbial community. And it deposits its own microbes onto the site. The hair, the sweat, and the little bit of divots, the little bit of divots that the hooves make in the land are actually creating enough disturbance to hold on to water when it rains. The land craves the animal. And when we take the animals off the land, we degrade the land. We learned from this guy, Ray Archuleta, and I love the fact that Elaine Ingham is right there at his feet. He was so excited when we heard, oh, by the way, this is when we introduced him to Kiss the Ground. Hello. Ray Archuleta, the soil guy, if you've seen anything by Kiss the Ground, you've seen him talk. He showed us what does it mean to have soil that has good structure. If your soil looks like this when you put it in water, this is bad structure. But if you can still see the clump of soil when you put it in water, this is good structure. It's acting like a sponge. He explained to us that the reason that the Gulf of Mexico is so incredibly messed up and hypoxic, meaning no oxygen, is because the soil is degraded here. And so all that soil, all the fertilizers, all the poisons that are used in the middle of the country are just flowing over the land into the Gulf of Mexico through the watershed of the Mississippi River. And this just reinforced for us the importance of coming back to that watershed idea. We are all connected in some way. We're connected through the mycorrhizal network. We're connected through our love of plants. We're connected through our watersheds. And he also explained to us that soil that had no structure was going to also not just run away, but blow away as well. You're used to seeing pictures like this from the 1930s, but these are pictures from last year. And the picture down here in the corner, this is Arizona. It's called a haboob. It happens at least once a year. Massive quantities of topsoil blowing. The 1930s Dust Bowl is alive and well now, to this day. We need to deal with that. So then, we're up to 2017. 2017, I met this guy. And you know what? I'd read his paper before I met him. So I was like, kind of like fangirl. But he's Slovakian. He actually mostly couldn't understand very much that I was talking about, but that's cool. Anyway, this is Dr. Mikhail Kravchuk. He has a theory called the new water paradigm. Now, it's not directly soil related at this time. Cool thing is, Dr. Kravchuk has also changed, he's evolved as well, as I'm going to show you in a second. But at this time, in 2017, he was talking about the fact that the only way that we were going to actually create water abundance on this planet, again, availability for humans, is if we cool down the land. And the only way to cool down the land at the time that he was talking about was to actually capture rainwater in soil and store it in the soil sponge so that the earth itself would be cool. And the reason that he wanted us to cool, he's a climatologist as well as biology, but climatology. The reason he wanted us to store water in the soil is because it would improve what's called the small water cycle. The small water cycle is a cycle you probably never heard of. It's the rain cycle, it's the weather pattern that happens over land masses. And basically, it is driven by soil water. The soil water is cycled back up into the atmosphere by plants, and then it's precipitated down over land areas. It's important to us because when the small water cycle is strong, the big water cycle that is developing over oceans is weaker. And we all want a weaker big water cycle. Why? Because when the big water cycle is too strong, we get massive rainstorms. We get torrential, unpredictable, violent weather. And because the small water cycle has been so degraded, we don't hold rainwater in soil anymore. We paved paradise. And because we've done that, we actually heated up our environment. We've created what's called heat island. And so we cannot hold on to water on our land anymore because it evaporates. It's released. Our soil is hot. Our land is hot. Our atmosphere is hot. So all of that water is coming out of the soil and going up into the atmosphere, into these clouds, and forming these very, very violent rains. He wants us to cool our planet so that we can actually condense water on our land instead of evaporating. The small water cycle and this heat island effect and condensation was like a little light bulb going off in my head. Mind officially blown. I'll tell you what that is later. It was the first time I really thought about the impact of soil that was too hot. I realized, oh, wait a second. Of course, if you put hardscape down, it's going to get hot. But I never thought about the fact that if it didn't have plants on it, or if it wasn't holding water, or if it wasn't at least, at the very least, covered with mulch, it was going to be hot. It never occurred to me. But now I realize, oh, wait a second. We need to be advocates for ground cover. We need to make sure that there's planting to be done, because if we want water on this planet, water abundance, we are going to have to grow it. And that was the epiphany that I had after Michael Kravchuk. We got busy at Surfrider cutting curbs and putting water from streets into landscapes everywhere we possibly could. And we convened our second soil summit. And this soil summit allowed us to now think about the particular interaction between soil microbes and plants, or soil microbes and humans, or soil microbes and insects. And what we discovered by listening to Dr. David Montgomery was that the plants in our agricultural system had degraded significantly over the last 70 years. The nutritive value of the plants that we eat and that the animals we the plants eat has declined by 70%. This is light bulbs for me, because this is explaining, oh, why are we hungry? Why are we obese? Why do we crave? Why do we have issues with health and so forth? We have it because the food that we eat doesn't give it to us anymore. And oh, by the way, this is organic and conventional. It's not about whether it's organic or not, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But this is the practices of how we manage plants in agriculture, food. We had forgotten the importance of the soil microbes. Why? Because it turns out that terroir, which we all know from, the bottle of wine, right? Terroir, it's what gives the taste and so forth, the sense of place to a bottle of wine. Well, guess what? Terroir is made by microbes. Microbes are what create terroir in plants. Microbes are what create nutritional value in plants. No microbes, no healthy soil, no healthy plants, no nutritional value. Grown hydroponically, forget about it. No nutritive value. Has to be grown in healthy living soil. That's one of the reasons organic is a question, because it's a lot of hydroponic. We learned from John Witt at the Marine Carbon Project that there was another pathway to soil health. Remember, we had learned from Elaine Ingham about the decomposition pathway. Add organic matter, it decomposes by microbes, and that helps create soil health. But from John Witt, we learned about what's called the liquid carbon pathway. And now, this is starting to pull together a bunch of the different things that we've been learning over this time into something that's, a story, kind of comprehensible. John Witt, and he is not the guy, he is not Keanu Reeves, he's not played by Keanu Reeves. I think that would be very funny if Keanu Reeves did a Marine Carbon Project movie. That would be pretty funny. Anyway, okay. John Witt explained that actually the photosynthesis that plants are doing is sufficient to take massive quantities of carbon out of the atmosphere. And it isn't permanently sequestered in soil. It doesn't go into the soil and into the microbial community through the roots. It's called exudates. It's the sugars that the plant secretes in the soil to feed the microbes. That is not permanent sequestration. Permanent sequestration happens when those microbes die and when that carbon matter can be stored in an inert way. But for the most part, the carbon that plants are taking out of the atmosphere, it's going back into the atmosphere. And you're thinking, so why are we concentrating on this? Well, we're concentrating on this because the carbon goes back into the atmosphere, but it just goes into the atmosphere right at the level of the plant. And so what's interesting about that? Plants are carbon dioxide, they need that. That's their food. So they are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere here, they're putting it into the soil, and then microbes are exhaling it right at the plant just enough so that that plant gets its own food and doesn't have to work quite so hard. So this is carbon cycling. And what we're understanding now is that the plant is actually massively building its microbial community so that those microbes will exhale and give it CO2 right at the very top of the soil. It's a self-sustaining cycle that the plants, again, are in control of, but they can't do without the microbial community. So, liquid carbon pathway, I'm suddenly like, wow, we have two ways to build healthy soil. Plants themselves are doing it, and the decomposition of the organic matter, including the decomposition of the microbes who are dying. These are the two ways that healthy soil is being built. This is a picture of the exudates. They call it liquid sun. It is the material that the root is pressing out through the root to feed microbes, and it drives all of the biological processes I'm about to talk about. Are we bored? No. You doing okay? You all hanging in there with me? Okay, good. All right, I'm going to keep going. We got started really late, so hang with me, okay? Eureka! I got to meet okay, if you thought I was a fan with Michal Kravchuk, I was actually stupid with this guy, because he is so brilliant. Walter Yenny, Dr. Walter Yenny. He is a climatologist, I think geologist, I'm not sure, I think maybe geologist, but also biologist. So he, for the first time, for me, put it all together in what I'm going to call like a unifying theory of soil health. He explained that this carbon cycling, the liquid carbon pathway, and the effects of cooling the planet by having lots of plant material on the ground and having this spongy soil that's holding on to water was actually the key to reversing climate change. Why? Because that water is called green water. The water that's held in the soil profile is called green water. It is, first of all, just FYI, the largest source of fresh water on the planet. So that water that's held in the root structure of plants, largest freshwater source. And also, this carbon sponge is so cooling down the atmosphere, or could if it were working, it would be so cooling to the planet that we actually could start drawing down the emissions. We could actually start drawing down carbon efficiently. Without cooling the planet, the formulas do not work. We will never be able to draw down carbon. So we have to cool the planet, number one job. And there's only really one thing that cools planet. Plants. That's the only thing that does it. So plants making their soil sponge, holding on to the rainwater where they get it. I mean, this is a eureka for me. And basically what he explained is that we have to have soil structure. We're coming back to Ray Archuleta. We have to have that soil structure. We don't want soil that looks like this, no structure. We want soil that looks like this. Because only when it's like this are we going to be able to cycle carbon, sequester water, grow all the ground cover that we need, cool the planet, and live for another however long. This is my favorite picture. I call this the green water sponge. Green water is a term that if you ever read anything by the UN on water resources, it is a term for water that is in the soil root zone of plants, and that cycles. Okay. Now, here's another thing that I learned from Dr. Yenny. That microbial community in the soil, working with the plant, is working to make the plant more efficient at water use. So the fungi that are in the soil actually are able to access water that is unavailable to plant roots. So a plant has, access to these little tiny microfilms. A plant has access to water that's in the soil profile. But fungi has access to microfilms that are so tightly bound onto the particles of soil that they can't be taken off by the roots. The fungi have the strength that it's like superhuman strength. If you were a fungi, you could take your finger and push it through the floor, right? So that fungi is so small, so strong, it can actually break this bond of water on the soil particles. And what that means is, even when we have soils that to us, humans, is completely dry and desiccated, fungi have access to water there. So if we have soil that has fungal dominance, where those fungi are in that soil's party doing their thing, they are actually helping those plants be more efficient at water and use less water. The other thing we learned is that the other microbes in the soil kind of work together and they have strategies to help the plant use less water. And I'm going to show you what that is in a second. Also, the soil biology, the microbes in the soil, populate the entire plant. And when the plant photosynthesizes and releases water vapor into the atmosphere, so photosynthesis, they take the CO2 out of the atmosphere, they give back the oxygen, they hold on to the carbon, they make exudates out of it and do other stuff with that carbon, build their bodies and so forth. But in order to do photosynthesis, which is a really hot job, they need to cool themselves down like an air conditioner. And so they take water out of the soil and they take it up through their leaves and they press it out into the atmosphere, and it essentially cools them. And it's that water vapor going into the atmosphere. That's called evapotranspiration. It's a key irrigation concept. It's like basically water loss, you know, in plants. But guess what? Every single drop, every single micro drop of water that comes out of the plant has a soil microbe on it. Now, how crazy is that? That means that soil microbes are populating our atmosphere as well. And you're going to say, yeah, okay, that creeps me out. But here's the reason that you care about that. You care about that because of this thing called the biotic pump. Basically, this is research showing that plants, grasslands, and tree canopies, so forests and grasslands, are able to pump out enough water vapor with microbes on it that two things happen. One, they can create wind because there's like a cooling differential that creates a wind effect, but also the microbes condense water at a lower place in the atmosphere and bring water back to Earth faster than any other particulate does. So remember that small water cycle thing about, oh yeah, you know, water in the soil goes up and then it comes back down on the terrestrial land? Yeah, it does. And who makes that happen? Soil microbes make that happen. So not only do they create the sponge to hold on to the water that can be taken up through the plant to cool the plant and cool the planet, but also they're putting out the microbes to condense the water to bring the water back down to the planet. I mean, what? So, the other thing we learned was that soil bacteria makes you happy. Keep your hands in the soil, you can keep happy. So then Mary Lee and I went up to see another guy that we really like, this Dr. Paul Stamets character, and we found out that insect health is directly related to soil health. That actually honeybee hive collapse has everything to do with the absence of fungi in the soil and the absence of availability of fungi for the bees. So they need trees that have pairings with fungi in order to chelate the viruses and pesticides and things like that that they are exposed to in our environment, in our agricultural environment. And so he showed us that we actually need to have soil health if we want to protect insect populations as well. So it's not just about plants, not just about cooling the planet, not just about having abundant water, but also, do we want to have insects, you know, that feed the birds and that also pollinate our plants? A little side note, notice where the largest number of beehives are. Places that the U.S. has decided pretty much to have wars and problems with. Kind of an interesting thing. That's a whole other thing. We'll come back to that in a bit. Okay, so around about this time, I took a little detour and became the executive director of Pacific Horticulture. We're known for this magazine, but I wondered, would it embrace a soil-centric view of horticulture or not? Well, it turns out that we were able to do a fundraiser at the Gavilan Ranch in Hollister, California. And there I met Jeff Mundell, the ranch manager, who shows us this grass growing in Central California. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, this is a Mediterranean climate. How are we growing grass like this? Well, we're growing grass like this, which has a huge amount of biodiversity in it, native plants and all kinds of stuff going on in it. We're able to do that because of the way they manage animals on the land. That's how they do it. It's all with animal interaction. I also met this lady who I want to point out, Laura Wilson. She comes back when we relaunch Flower to the Peak. So after my experience at Gavilan, I'm like, I want to learn more about this growing grassland thing and growing forage, how we do it with animals. And so I became a Soil Health Academy groupie and met this guy, Dave Brown, and his ranch, and went to about 15 other ranches to take a look at how animal integration restores the health of soil. And I learned the 6 core principles of regenerative agriculture, which are understanding context, but here the most important thing: do not disturb the soil. If you want healthy soil, you don't disturb it. You leave it as it is. No destruction. Maximizing crop diversity, so lots of plants, keeping the soil covered, and keeping weeds in the ground all year round. I went to Las Damas Ranch in Chihuahua Desert, and I saw this happen. This is the small water cycle at work over a ranch. This side, they use their animals to rebuild the soil health. This side does not. Where's the rain? This guy grows rain in the Chihuahuan Desert. And oh, by the way, lest you think that mesquite and this stuff is what's supposed to be there, it is not. Chihuahuan Desert is a tall grass prairie. I went to the Burroughs family nut farm in upstate, up in the Central Valley. And as I was driving up there, because it just rained, it was like raining on my way, I went past this orchard. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And then I went to their orchard. Yeah, their orchard is a sponge. There's no standing water. All that water is in the ground. The plants have that water. It's nice and cool where they are. It's almost dry where they are. I went to this training, the Climate Reality, what was it? The Climate Reality Project. And I learned from this guy that, it's funny, I don't have a title on it. I learned from this guy about how the health of the planet, and how I talked about how soil health might become a key principle in the work that is being done against emissions and against heat islands and in climate change. So went there to advocate basically for soil. And meanwhile, G3 started putting more soil principles into action. Still decomposition pathway, building rain gardens. And then I decided to go meet another person that I had a little bit of like a weird, almost like a stalking thing. I tried to see her like 4 times, and then finally I was able to. Dr. Christine Jones. Dr. Christine Jones is midlife crisis number 2. Because Dr. Christine Jones was talking about something called quorum sensing. Okay, quorum sensing, and this is what it is. Quorum sensing is when the microbial community is diverse enough and extensive enough that the participants in the microbial community decide to edit the genes of the plants that are in the system for the benefit of the community. They edit the genes of the plants to have favorable behaviors. Drought tolerance, cold tolerance, heat tolerance, wind tolerance, chewing tolerance, like getting cut lower and lower right by animals grazing. It goes on and on. And this is official mind blown, scrape it off the ground. Because now it's not just there's a relationship, it's not just talking and communication. This is actual intervention in the plant by the microbial community. And what we learned is that the plants actually, over a period of time, this soil microbiome editing of the plant genes is found, evidence of it is found in the animals that eat the plants. So the soil health is creating what are called epigenetic behavior. It's creating something that can be passed down generation to generation by the community, and it's also being expressed in different species that are interdependent. So insects are being affected, animals are being affected, humans are being affected by this quorum sentiment. I promise you I'll wrap it up. I've got like a whole mess of more slides, but I'm almost done. This took me to the Jenna experiment in Germany. Haven't been there yet to see the plots, but I learned about it. Very fascinated by it. The Jenna experiment planted out plots of plants to see how do these plants behave when they're together. Now, let me ask you, when we do plant trials, how do we do them? Right? You have a plot of this one, and then a plot of this plant, and then a plot of this plant. And we compare. How do they do? Water, fertilizer, whatever. Jenna said, I want to see how do 5 plants work together? How do 10 plants work together? How do 40 plants work together? Do they have different behaviors? Is there different stuff that goes on? Are they more resistant to flooding? Are they more resistant to burning? Are they more resistant to, do they need less water? Are they more resistant to pests and disease? And so this is a 10-year experiment, so 10 or 15 years now at this time. It's ongoing, super well funded. And you're not going to understand this, but basically this is the takeaway. As plant richness increases, in other words, the more different species and families, especially of plants that you have in the system, the more positive compounding and cascading effects occur. In other words, pest populations plummet, water requirement plummets, nitrogen cycling increases, all the good things. In other words, more is more. And what we understand now is that when we go to a community like this, a grassland and highly diverse prairie community, this is what's going on. This is why these things persist. Because there's not one species, there's 15. Or they're not just 15 species, they're 15 families. So species from different families. And because there are all these different families, the effects are compounded. I promise you, 2 more, this is it. Rhizophagy is the next one. Okay, so like mind blown, right? Plants are working together, they're editing the microbes are editing the genes of plants to get outcomes that are good for the plant and for us. Well, guess what? It goes even further. The plant actually eats the microbes. It's not the other way around. The plant eats microbes. It takes microbes into its body through its roots, and it strips the stuff off the microbe, and then it kicks it back out through its root wall, and it says, go back and mine me more nutrient or whatever you're going to do. And this interaction is called rhizophagy, and why it's important is because the plant, over time, actually begins to select the microbial community that is most beneficial for it, and then it takes those microbes in through its roots and sends it up into its reproductive organs, and those microbes populate the seed of the plant. So when the plant seed is put in the ground, it has a 9 billion microbe community specially selected by its parents to take care of it and get it jump-started so that this diverse community can actually get growing faster. So, what does a landscaper do with that? Well, I'll tell you one thing. It says, screw this stuff in pots. I want to do seed. I want seed. I get a lot more diversity, a lot faster, a lot cheaper, right? So that's something that it did for me. Now, 9 billion microbes per seed. That's diversity. And that builds soil complexity because each of those microbes has relationships with each other, with different plants, with different with different macrofauna, and it goes on. So, the thing that rhizophagy and quorum sensing kind of lead us to understand is that when we plant a seed and we say, which one of you are seeds? And we say, okay, which of you is going to germinate? Who determines that? Is it the amount of water we give it, or the amount of sunlight, or, you know, it's only the native seed who's going to germinate here or whatever? No. The soil is going to determine who germinates. The soil is the microbial community that is available in the soil at that moment is going to determine. If the microbial community is degraded and isn't super diverse and isn't able to support, you know, a nice California native plant system, you're not going to get it. You're going to get mustard. No, I'm serious. Because the soil can't support it. The soil is paired. The seed bank is filled with seed. And it's saying, this guy is more adapted to my degraded situation. So, I need a freaking sabbatical. Right? I've been just learning and teaching and doing, and I need a sabbatical, so I became a storm chaser. And I headed back to the plains to start looking up into the sky. And what I discovered is that these types of storms are going to continue to happen because the small water cycle is really super broken, and because all that water from the Gulf of Mexico is filling up into the sky, and it's those clouds filled with all that water from the Gulf of Mexico, laden with it, are flowing over these super hot, tilled, disturbed, dry, hot plains where we do our agriculture and our feeding of animals. And we are not going to solve anything until we get some action. But I also like storm chasing because I get to botanize. And I botanize the verges. I like the verges. I want to point out this plant right here is spiracea. I see it everywhere in the plains, which is really kind of interesting. But I think there's a book, Women on the Verge. That's the book I think I'm going to write. It's botanizing. You get it? You think that's funny? I think that's pretty funny. Okay. Okay. So then I got a certificate in regenerative agriculture from Chico State because, well, okay, you got to do it. You have a little credit. And I became certified in the savory method of animal adaptive grazing at the White Buffalo Land Trust. And something happened there that was really interesting. Now, White Buffalo Land Trust is in Central California. I've got like 3 minutes. It's in Central California. So everything they're doing is adapted to the Mediterranean climate, etc. And what the heck are they doing but cover cropping? They're putting cover crop down. Why? On their rangelands, on their vineyards, pretty much on everything. And the reason that they're doing it is because the soil is really degraded. And they are using plants that are not native plants, but are plants that are really, really good at regenerating soil. And they're putting that down in order to get the soil to a certain level so that the seed bank that is of the native plants will begin to express itself. And they use animals to eat the cover crop and manage it, and it is a super successful operation, and I highly recommend you go to visit the White Buffalo Land Trust if you ever want to get away. It's in the Central Coast right up above San Juan. Okay? Now, last 2 things. I also learned at the White Buffalo Land Trust about really how to read bricks. Bricks is a measure that if you're a vintner, if you deal with grapes, you know this because it's a measure of the sugar, dissolved sugar solids in the grapes. And so they've been using this for years. But Brix is also just a measure of dissolved solids in plant leaves or in plant matter. And this really groundbreaking research done by Dr. Tom Dykstra discovered that there is a direct correlation between the amount and diversity of dissolved solids that are in the plant tissue and whether or not that plant attracts chewing insects. So, not only did he get that, but he also got, I'm going to go here, he also got that the insects hear the stress. It's a wavelength that is emitted from the plant, and the nitrogen is the one that is the most common you can think of. When a plant has been fertilized with fertilizer, like with really any fertilizer other than something that stimulates the soil health, so like anything that's a water-soluble nitrogen, when the plant receives a water-soluble nitrogen, it takes it up into the plant, that emits a particular sound wavelength. And the chewing insects can hear it. And not only can they hear it, but they can hear what direction it's from. And so the aphids, the grasshoppers, all the stuff that you know as being the scourge of our farming life are just like, we're down, let's go. So when we fertilize, we are actually creating the opportunity for pests to come. You know, an invitation, basically, for pests to come. This does not occur when the soil health is creating the nitrogen for the plant. So when it's biological nitrogen, fixed from the atmosphere by microbes and plants, no, we don't have a problem. But when it's water soluble, we have a problem. So not only did we show that, you know, at low Brix, there's this greater occurrence of pathogens and insects and predation of all kind. And as the Brix gets higher and higher and higher, more dissolved solids, more diverse dissolved solids, the insect pressure goes away, the pathogens go away, all that stuff disappears. But also that, in fact, addition of pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers to the soil, to the plant, encourages the insects and pathogens to come. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm basically done, but I do want to tell you what I'm up to right this minute. Can you do it like with another just 2 minutes? Okay, here we go. Okay, look. The same summer I took my sabbatical, this happened. I saw this. The water had been turned off for 4 months. And I saw this on the screen. I'm like, huh? These guys are still green. What the heck is going on here? They're really green. No water for 4 months. What's happening? And I realized, oh, maybe there's something here in all this soil health stuff that could be really, really relevant to turf removal programs. Because maybe there are other green things that could be planted as ground covers that, you know, are building soil health and making things better for us, taking advantage of succession. I started doing a deep dive on what weeds tell us. And I realized, oh my gosh, when you see things, weeds, forbs, in the landscape, they are actually indicators of soil health. So every single weed has a superpower. It mines some mineral, it cycles some mineral, whatever. And so you can actually tell by what's growing, what's happening in the soil. And I realized, well, maybe what we could do is, instead of thinking about lawn removal like this, where we have to spray it out, scrape it out, remove all that carbon from a site, disturb the soil. Wow, that's going against principle number 1. Instead of doing that, what if there was something we could add in? What if we could like be adding the way nature does to make the system more complex so that the soil would start to help the plants that we want to be growing here grow here. And let me just skip by this. It's basically finding a way to harness what's called succession. Succession is as soil health becomes more complex from being bacteria-based to fungal-based. The ground cover on top changes. So when you have a very bacterially based soil, you're going to see a lot of grasses, a lot of weeds, that's the kind of stuff. But as it gets more complex, more healthy, more whatever, you start to see more woody plants. And eventually, over time, and in some ecosystems where there's enough water, you can actually start to see woody plants like our chaparral communities, or even climax forest. And so maybe if we don't take this grass out, we could say, okay, we're starting with grass. How do we get here by keeping grass in place? And by building a soil sponge with decomposition and growing lots of plants with liquid carbon pathway and making it very, very diverse and encouraging animals and humans who are animals too, especially when they're that age, and understanding that everything we do is going to have an effect. Maybe there's a project here, and so here's the project. California is trying to get rid of up to 20,000 acres of lawn. That is called non-functional turf. It is it's on commercial sites, it's the grass that isn't being used as a sports field or whatever. And they're banning the irrigation of it, but they're also encouraging the removal of it. And so we are worried about this. We're afraid it's all going to look like this or like this. Synthetic grass, right? So we came up with something called a polyculture lawn. And we call it Take Back the Turf. What if we kept the lawn in place, we added seeds, we did stimulated it like animals, and we grew a more complex ecosystem, and we call it polyculture lawn instead of monoculture lawn. What if we had a polyculture lawn? What does it look like? It's not a meadow, and it's not a prairie. It's something in between. Some flowers, some grasses, you decide how tall you want it. It's a wild lawn. It has a highly diverse seed mix that we use. 100 species, 20 families. Remember the genetics story. And we also have this thing called Nike Buffalo, which is basically humans. So we have these activities that humans can do where they go out and they play on the lawn. And they actually stimulate the lawn, just like buffalo do, because we're plant eaters too, aren't we? So what we are hoping to do is actually create a different way of thinking about lawn, that it doesn't have to be something doused in poison. It doesn't have to be something that you put fertilizer on and fight the pests. It doesn't have to be monoculture. It can be polyculture. It can be different heights. It can have things that we used to think of as weeds that are actually building soil and creating something better for us. It can be an interim stage, or it can be the end result. But it's a new type of lawn, basically. And we are doing a 2-year study, and I know, here it is. If you know of any sites, 1/2 acre to 5 acres, we are looking to do samples of this in commercial sites. So commercial, so HOAs, if you have a business park or you own in commercial property, we're looking to do this. We do these events. This is Seeds and Suds, where you take seed and just put it out for like birds, and then you wash your cup and fill it up with craft brew and drink it, and that's a way for you to be on the site and hanging out there, Seeds and Suds. That's happening in Colorado. We have lots of talks. These are pictures from Seeds and Suds. We have adults that like to pick the flowers, and picking flowers is okay. We got kids too. We do a stomp and romp. Stomp and romp is when people come and they act as ungulates. So you can be a cow or a goat or a sheep, and you go out and you stomp on the ground. Basically, you stomp. You break things off. And stomp and romp, right? The only animals we have are people, so that's what we're doing. It's pretty hilarious, actually. And it's highly diverse. The stuff that comes up is super diverse. We use iNaturalist to determine what plants are there, and then we'll link bird ID for birds, and bug identifier for insects. We're doing soil testing and monitoring. We're working with nonprofits running on carbon to monitor it annually and take lots and lots of tests. so we're looking for people to bring us sites. And I'm going to grapple with this. This is it, people. If we don't get going on fixing our soil, we are going to be subject to more of this, climate refugees. Because civil unrest is basically created by climate refugees. This is Syria. It was essentially triggered by people moving from the countryside where the soil no longer supported agriculture into the urban areas. That is what triggered most of the civil unrest in Syria. And unfortunately, corporate interests have shut down our ability to have any kind of global governance on this. We have inflation. We have prices that are just going through the roof. Lots of sources of stressor, and individuals and communities are breaking down. Did you know that suicide is out of control in the agriculture field because people just don't know what to do. And this is civil unrest. So if you want more of that, don't fix the soil. But if you don't want that, soil health. Thanks. Did you? Maybe one or two questions. It's way late. Yes?
I live on loamy, and it says that there's 10% of the compost, 10 parts of the soil is 1 part of it. 9 parts of soil is 1 part of compost. Are you flexible on that, or is that just...
Who says that?
There's a machine called a loamy, and it makes soil from the table scraps.
I don't know. Has anyone used loamy?
Well, they were suggesting take 1 part of the compost.
Oh, yeah, so you hold back compost from the previous time. Is that what you're saying?
It makes compost.
Yes, I
So you
understand.
take the compost and 10 times soil to 1 part of compost.
Oh, so when it makes the compost, you then use the compost in the landscape.
In the soil.
So in other words, if you have, a cup of compost, let's just say,
You have your own dirt.
then you could cover like 10 square feet or something. I think that's what you're talking about.
I put a bucket of dirt that I had.
I don't think you need to do that. I think you can sprinkle it on top of the ground.
You can add it to the soil and make it.
Yeah, so I don't think you need to. So the cool thing about compost is, and that lady right there, Stephanie, is much more of a compost person now than I am. But one of the cool things about compost is it isn't fertilizer. There's nothing fertilizer about it. It is enzyme and it is organic matter available to the microbes to digest. So compost can just go on top of the ground and be watered in. You don't have to mix it, you don't have to do anything. But if you are planting, you can put it in with the plant too. So it's super flexible like that, and I'm sure that's just some kind of guidance that they're giving, but it's not a hard and fast. You can use it anywhere, anytime.
In England, they call the leaf mold with a manure cow manure.
Yeah.
With pudding.
Oh, that's hilarious.
They use.
That's hilarious. That's a lot of nitrogen. That would probably bring insects. But anybody else?
Hello.
Yeah.
How long it will take to become a sponge after you do the lasagna?
What a great question. How long does it take to become a sponge after you do lasagna? Unfortunately, extremely long. And the reason is you have to have plants. It doesn't just become lasagna without the plants. The decomposition process, as it turns out, is kind of slow. It takes time for that to happen. But the way that it happens a lot faster is when you plant a lot of different diverse plants in the site at the same time that you do the sheet mulching, and it's the liquid carbon pathway with the decomposition pathway that creates the sponge.
So, another question, you should be watered hot to become faster or?
Okay, so oxygen, water, and life. Every soil condition needs those 3 things. And so you need to apply sufficient water. First of all, when you're doing the sheet mulching, when you're doing the lasagna, it's wet. It needs to be what we call turgid. It needs to be wet all the way through. Wet, wet, wet. Totally wet. in order for the microbial community to get going. Like it wakes up the microbial community to start to digest. But you have to remember that microbes are really short-lived, right? Some of them are like a day. Some of them are hours. They're really, really short-lived. So the ones that are starting to eat they're not the ones that are going to be there, you know, tomorrow or at the end of the week. So it needs to, you need to have enough water or plant roots in the system so that that food and everything is cycling continuously. This is why when we did sheet mulching, you know, for years, that was all we were doing. We didn't really understand how densely you had to plant in order to really get a good response. And yeah, you get, you know, it converts. You know, when you put mulch down on the ground, what happens? It decomposes and turns into soil. It takes 6 months, it maybe takes a year, but it starts to do that. When you have it planted and you have the mulch around it, it happens a lot faster. That decomposition of the mulch in between the plants happens a lot faster. And in part, that's because you're watering the plants, but also it's because the plants are feeding the microbes and really keeping them going.
Pretty much irrigation should be on top.
No. So, oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, should it be spray irrigation or drip? That's what you're asking. No. So if you have if you're just irrigating and there are no plants there, and all you're trying to do is decompose wood material, yeah, you need to spray it because there's nothing else, right? But if you have a plant there, drip irrigation, because the plant roots are what is doing the job, right? It's not the rest of it, it's the plant roots. So the plant roots need the water, you need to get it as efficiently as possible to the plant roots. Oh, big debate. Now it's going to open up a can of worms. Everyone's going to hate me. Oh, it's only like it when you spray them, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, they only take up water through their roots, folks.
When you're doing like broadcasted seed to do these diverse
Polycultures.
polycultures, do you have a strategy in terms of actually covering seed or pre-soaking? Is there like some higher success rate for lots of seed?
That is a great question. Okay, the question is there a strategy for improving your germination rate with seed? That's it, right? That you're broadcasting. So in this particular case, there's a protocol, and what we are doing is we're actually prepping the site by cutting the grass very low, scalping it, raking up the thatch, and then we are core aerating. So we're pretending we're animals and we're making little divots. Then we are broadcasting the seed. The seed mix. So I'll give you an example. If I were in Kansas doing a agricultural field with a cover crop, I would maybe get like 60 pounds an acre. No, not even. I'm sorry. I get 10 pounds an acre of seed. I'm doing 200.
just by numbers.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just by sheer number,
Right.
I have so much more seed than, you know, it's shock and awe, I call it.
Right.
I have so much more seed going down and that's to make up for the fact that it's being broadcast.
You
But
said like
then,
200 pounds an acre?
yeah, it's about
That's not
200
right.
pounds an acre, between 150 and 200 depending on the mix. And the thing is that there are a lot of reasons I can do it. It's still incredibly cheap when you compare it to bringing in plants in containers. Okay, $10 a square foot to do a turf replacement. Like if you can do it for 10, you can. No, you can do it. 20, but everybody says 10. Water agencies. I'm doing it for 2. So even at that rate of seed. Anyway, the thing about this is that after the seed is applied, so I get good seed to soil contact because I've got the core aeration, I've dethatched, I have good seed to soil contact. I then cover it with a 1/4 inch of compost and all the thatch. It comes back on as a cover, as a seed cover, and then it's irrigated for germination, which is basically 3 times a day for the first 2 weeks and so forth. We do have brochures on our website, flowertothepeople.com. We have brochures on how to do it.
So does
Yeah.
that grass eventually just die back and go away and then other plants are going?
What a great question! Good question, right? Does the grass stay or does it go? That's what you're asking, right? It depends. In some conditions, you may still have that grass because that condition favors it. But what happened, here's the thing about grass. Traditional like monoculture lawn, it is an excellent carbon sequester. I mean, it isn't now, but when it gets into the right ecosystem, it freaking sequesters carbon like nobody's business. It's very, very good. Grasses do that. That's what they're good at. But they can't do it if they don't have plants that fix nitrogen, if they don't have plants that cycle potassium, if they don't have plants that cycle all the other nutrients, calcium and all the other things. So what we're doing is we're taking this really great carbon sequester and we're adding in all these other plants that are just not very good at carbon sequestering. And the system cooperates. All the seeds all start to cooperate with each other and everybody throws in what they're good at. And the grass gives the carbon to the other plants. And over time, other plants start to emerge that are maybe a little bit more adapted to the new conditions that have been created. And so the monoculture, the old grass can't survive. So what we're seeing is there are old grass in some places filled with flowers, some places there are no flowers, some places it's all flowers and the grass goes away completely. Some places a different grass expresses itself. So it's a very tapestry type of landscape. I didn't really answer it, but I sort of did. Yeah. So
It's meadow like. You said it wasn't a meadow, but it's definitely.
but it's not, okay, so the reason I said it's not a meadow is because when you get past the Rockies and go east from there, there's a lawn to meadow program. And meadowscaping are very, very big. You know, that's their remit. We have turf removal, they have meadowscaping, which is also turf removal. But in order to do that, they're focusing on particular species of flowering plants mostly that are like, you know, big showy flowering plants. And also the way they prep their site is by repeated spraying of herbicide in order to create a completely empty scenario, and then they're adding the seed or whatever into it. So we're doing it differently. We're not disturbing the site. We're keeping the grass in place, and we're cannibalizing it, basically. So the things that grow in our sites, some of them get this tall, but most of them are more like this. I can do both.
I have a question about that. So, you know, usually on the little, when you buy the seed, it says 200 square feet.
Yeah.
So basically you're saying instead of putting 200, you should do 600, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but not of your seed,
oh,
like my seed.
okay. All
My
right.
seed has 100 different species from 20 different families in it. That's the mix. So I'm not taking like grass seed and just one grass or even a 5-seed blend and just, you know, trying that. I'm taking something really super, super diverse, and I'm experimenting right now. Like, this isn't my final seed mix. This is a pilot. We're doing data collection. I didn't make that clear maybe, but we're doing data collection to figure out, okay, what is the blend of like non-native stuff that just is really good at doing the soil building? How quick does that die out? And then do natives start to show up? Natives from the seed mix, natives from the seed bank. Are there other things that we didn't think would ever grow here that are actually growing here? So we're doing that as our test. And yes, 200 pounds per acre.
And Pamela, where can people find information again?
Flowertothepeople.com.
All right.
Thank you so much.